Asian American Federation. Thank you all for joining us on such short notice. I want to be clear about one thing. Our community didn't ask for this. We didn't ask for the hashtags and the cause for solidarity and the chants and the constant flood of emotions. But we are here today because over and over and over again, we have been shown that we are not welcome here. Asian New Yorkers have been shown in the most physical way possible that some don't see us as part of our city. Because if you did, we wouldn't slice a neighbor's face, get thrown down, get stomped on, and across another state, but have a neighbor buy a gun in the afternoon to hunt down 8 of our neighbors out of anger driven by stereotype. But this is our reality, and now this is part of our history. And we are here to stand up and refuse to swallow this bitterness. The Asian American Federation and our partners have been working day in and day out, expecting so much from each other, especially my staff who've been bearing their own pain, because we have work to do to help our community from further attacks. Since January 2020, Federation has led the charge to advocate for stronger response to the surge in anti-Asian violence, which has reached almost 4,000 incidents nationally and over 1,100 in New York City alone, more than one every 8 hours. Hate incident every 8 hours in New York City. We are here today because the urgency of the moment requires a plan that can meet the moment. We are here to unveil our Hope Against Hate campaign, a bold campaign and a bold plan that reimagines how we fight hate, focusing on community-based solutions that include all who are in the community, small businesses, houses of worship, nonprofit organizations, and individuals. What makes this campaign bold is exactly what shouldn't make it surprising. Our member agencies have been doing this work in one form or another, but we need reinforcements. We need money. We need allies. We cannot do this alone, and we cannot do this without resources. So we are here to call upon our elected leaders from every level of government to ask for an investment of $30 million to be able to launch this campaign. We're asking federal, state, city elected leaders. We're asking for private philanthropy. We're asking corporations. We need to be able to address what is happening in our community to prevent further attacks and to be able to help the victims. During this busy budget season, we demand that our elected officials prioritize our safety instead of sending us their thoughts and prayers. We don't need that anymore. We need resources and we need bold action, and we feel like we have the answer. This is a fight for all of us versus racism, and it is going to take all of us to win this fight. I want to thank all of my friends who have shown up at the 11th hour. This press conference again came together with such short notice, and I know so many of you here are here to help, here to lend your voices, here to stand in solidarity because you serve New Yorkers who are being targeted. And I also want to thank all of our elected officials who've stood with us. Their support has really meant the world to us to get us to keep going, keep moving forward. And that their support has just personally and professionally meant the world to us. And when we talk about all New Yorkers joining together, no one else speaks more eloquently about what happened than Noel Quitana. Through his horrific ordeal, he is one of the victims who's very bravely talked about what has happened. And we all know his story. And Noel's radical call to action is that we stand up and help each other. So with that introduction, I'm going to ask Noel if my folks can unmute Noel and also to say, Noel, good morning. It's good to see you. Thank you, everybody.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning. Uh, uh, I think you heard all about it because it's been in the news and it's been in the papers, it's been in the blog that I've been attacked in the subway unprovoked. I'm going to work on that day, February 3rd. And while in the train, somebody came in and just slashed my face unprovokedly. And when I called for help, nobody came. So nobody came for help. So I step out of the train and look elsewhere to uh, to seek for help. And I think it is important for us to know on such occasions on how to not really prevent, because we couldn't prevent sometimes on the matter, but on how to help a victim, because there are a lot of people in the train. In fact, there are no more seating space, so it's a not really a jump pack, but it's a full pack train, and I didn't receive any assistance from any of the riders, and I felt alone. And because when um, when there is something happen in the train, like trivial things like dancing, uh, a rat, for instance, the people there video the the occasion, but on this case, it is a more important, or the most important thing. Nobody even videoed the event. So the perpetrator or the suspect just flew easily. Nobody even stopped. Nobody even stopped him, and even they didn't even call the train operator to stop that there is something emergency going on in the train. And it is important that almost every New Yorker how to respond to this kind of occasion. And I think we do need knowledge or things on how to respond on emergency like this. Uh, I don't go out so much now because there's a lot of violence in the streets and I don't feel safe. So when I go out, I felt threatened, and I'm so conscious around my surrounding that I look around, that see to it that nobody is around me and nobody would just kick me in the street. So I feel unsafe. I think it is also important for someone, especially the elders, to have escort um, on their way to on their way to their routines, like going to the church or going to the grocery or to the pharmacy. And it is also important for us on how to record or to record or respond to a an emergency like this, like probably videoing the event, or probably taking notes of what have happened, so that when the authorities arrive, or the prosecutor asks for witnesses, they could tell something because it is written on their notes. So I think it is important for us to do something with regard to with regard to documenting on how to document um, events or crimes being perpetrated in a city. Let's see.
Thank you so much, Noel, for those words. I think we want to thank you so much for having the courage to come here and recall that story. And I think, as we said a month ago when we met you, your story continues to be a source of a daily reminder of the resilience of our community. So I want to thank you for your courage to step up and speak out and really enforce why we are all here today. So thank you again. And next up, I would like to introduce our senior senator, Chuck Schumer.
Well, thank you, Ravi, and I want to thank you and Joanne, you, for putting this very, very important event together, and the entire Asian American Federation, who has been so vigilant and strong in speaking out against the bigotry we have seen, unfortunately. I want to thank my Congresswoman. I am proud to vote for Yvette Clarke because I live in her district. So not only is she my constituent, but I am her constituent. And I particularly want to give my thanks, as you did, Ravi, to Noel Quitana. I first heard Noel at a rally after his attacker slashed him from cheek to cheek with a box cutter on the L train. And Noel, your strength, as Ravi mentioned, is so important. The scriptures say that many of our religious beliefs say that when something bad happens to you, it's easy to curse the darkness and just say, why did it happen to me, and get angry. But those who, even though something terrible has happened to them, fight so that it doesn't happen to others, they are what's called lighting a candle, and they are like angels. So you are like our angel, Noel, and we thank you so much for your courage and strength. Look, we've seen so much violence. The shootings in Colorado came a week after the tragedy outside Atlanta, where 8 people were killed in that string of shootings, 6 of whom were women of Asian descent. But let's put this in context. It's not just an isolated incident, unfortunately. Over the past year, there's been a rising tide of violence against Asian Americans, driven by fear, misinformation, age-old prejudices against the Asian American community. And I've talked to our New York Asian American citizens. I spoke to an elderly man, very nice man. He said, I'm afraid to even go outside and walk on the street. Someone will shout an insult at me. Someone will shout a racial epithet, and I'd even be worried about assault. And so these are the things that we so worry about, our Asian community and every one of us, because we all know that bigotry against one of us is bigotry against all of us. And that's why it's so important every one of us speak out against this form of bigotry and so many other forms. What's happened in the last 4 years, and I've said this at some of the rallies, but it's worth repeating. There's always been racism and bigotry in America. We know that from the days of 1619. But there's always been an effort in the better angel, push it down, not let it happen, to eradicate it, to erase it. But unfortunately, in the last 4 years with Donald Trump, he has hardly ever spoken out against it, and oftentimes encouraged it, either directly or indirectly. Why do we think that he called the virus, I'm not even going to repeat the words, what he called it? He was playing on bigotry. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing in trying to rally people of dark soul to that type of thinking. So we have to keep fighting more now than ever, because of the 40 years, some of these dark forces have been, instead of pushed underground, encouraged to be above ground. That's very important. And I'll tell you something. Some people say, well, it's too soon to speak about the structural injustices that led to the tragedy. That's ridiculous. Spare me. I'll tell you what's too soon. It was too soon for all of those beautiful souls to be taken from their families, stolen from their friends, stolen from their communities. And it's not that, as I said, this happens far too often. The same day as the Colorado shooting, an organization called Stop AAPI Hate released a report that showed 3,800 incidents of hate against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the last year. That's more than 10 a day, and that doesn't record all of them. That's just a small number. So the fear in the Asian American community The threat of violence against its members should be a topic of national conversation. As I said, we cannot let it go unchecked because it's an assault on all of us and on the American way. And we all know the story of the Asian American community is an American story, coming to the country, building strong communities, opening local businesses, churches, civic organizations, and slowly gaining political representation despite the odds. But the past few years have shown us, despite the great Americans that Asian Americans make, the age-old demon of racism is still there. So we all have an obligation to speak up. I have done it regularly, almost every day I'm at a rally, but there's other things that I have done using my abilities as the majority leader of the Senate. So I've begun the process to make 2 pieces of legislation available to the full Senate to be voted on when we return. The first is a bill led by my friend, Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii. She's one of our 2 Asian American women in the Senate. And it would address COVID-related hate crimes against Asian Americans head on. It would assign a point person in the Department of Justice to expedite the review of COVID-19 related hate crimes. It then gives support to state and local law enforcement to respond to hate crimes and works on solutions to the problems of the racially discriminatory language that's been used in the pandemic. And then there's a second bill by Senator Durbin, our whip, to counter the threat of domestic terrorism and white violence supremacy. This was passed by the House of Representatives last year by an overwhelming margin, and it's a no-brainer. So as we mourn these losses, as we mourn these crimes, the Senate is going to recommit itself. Hopefully we can get a strong bipartisan vote to that great American creed, e pluribus unum, out of many one. So thank you, Ravi. Thank you, everybody. And I will stand with you until all bigotry one day is eradicated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator, for those comments. I think, a lot of this work is not just showing solidarity in person, but also demonstrating solidarity through leadership. And so we really appreciate you being out front while the stories of those like Noel really spread around the country. And so much of this Hope Against Hate initiative is rooted in reinforcing what community-based organizations are doing, what community members are already trying to do. It's about empowering through existing work and exploring ways to make sure this is a community-led initiative, because those are the most sustainable initiatives out there to fight hate. So thank you again, Senator. Thank you again, Noel. And I'd like to introduce my Congresswoman as well from the 9th District, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke.
Let me, first of all, thank you so much for reaching out, Ravi. Let me greet my senator and constituent, the Honorable Chuck Schumer, and to everyone here gathered. I'm Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, and I represent New York's 9th District, that's Central and South Brooklyn. And the indignities that have been suffered by members of the AAPI community have been long-standing. It predated the COVID-19 crisis, but so many of our family, friends, and neighbors had suffered in silence. And today we say no more to that. We're gathered today to put hope against hate. And I applaud the work of the American Asian Federation for launching this transformative and innovative solution to responding to and efforts to quell those egregious attacks on the AAPI community here in New York. Let me say to Noel that, when I look at you and I see and saw what occurred to you, I felt as though my own family member were attacked. And I think that when we can put ourselves in the place of others, when we can empathize and understand that our collective humanity, when one of us is attacked, all of us are attacked, then we're building the momentum and the movement we need to transform our civil society. Since January of 2020, members of the AAPI community have been targeted by horrific and deadly attacks in their communities here in New York and across our nation. Long-standing businesses have been forced to shutter. not only due to the pandemic, but also due to the vicious vitriol and hatred that has been targeting the AAPI community. Those violent attacks have left the AAPI community reeling and its members afraid to ride the subway, send their children to school, or even step outside of their homes. Since the start of the pandemic last spring, Asian Americans have faced racist violence at a much higher rate than in previous years. The NYPD reported that hate crimes motivated by anti-Asian sentiment jumped 1,900% in New York City in 2020. And there were 29 reported racially motivated crimes against people of Asian descent in 2020 in New York City, and 24 of those were attributed to coronavirus motivation, according to the NYPD data. Many attribute the 2020 uptick to the xenophobic rhetoric of our last president, or the last man in the Oval Office, the former occupant of the White House, repeatedly directing blame for that pandemic. In doing so, he advanced and reignited a long American history of using diseases to justify anti-Asian xenophobia, one that dates back to the 19th and 20th centuries and has helped to shape the perception of Asian Americans as perpetual foreigners. Stop AAPI Hate, a reporting database created at the beginning of the pandemic as a response to the increase in racial violence, received 2,808 reports of anti-Asian discrimination between March 19th and December 31st alone. The violence has continued into 2021, and President Joe Biden has signed an executive order denouncing anti-Asian discrimination shortly after taking office in January. Additionally, I am proud to be an original co-sponsor of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which seeks to address the ongoing hate and violence targeted toward Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders by providing greater assistance with law enforcement response to COVID-19 hate crimes and creating a position at the Department of Justice to facilitate expedited review of such cases. I have to really say that I am just so honored to serve with a sister of mine from another mister, and that's the Honorable Grace Meng, who had been sending out a clarion call around the uptake in violence, what was taking place in the households of our neighbors, and the concerns that we all have to have about our collective humanity. And I stand shoulder to shoulder with her in this battle against hate. It is important to condemn hate and assign the crimes committed under this designation as such, because let me be very clear, these are hate crimes. And it's time to take our efforts to the next level and ensure we are using every tool in our toolbox to help adequately address this problem. When grandmothers are brutalized and children are derided, and ordinary, everyday neighbors, friends, family members are slaughtered at work because they're Asian Americans, it is past time for us to act. I know how challenging it can be to stay hopeful through such hatred. Believe me, you know, we've all had to witness so many disgraceful acts, but I know that together we can prevail. As Dr. King once said, and I heard our senator also speak about it from the scriptures, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. The AAPI community and the people of this country have our love today. We have you have my support today, tomorrow, and into the future. Together, we will win. Together, we will change hearts and minds and ostracize the antisocial behavior that is discrimination, bigotry, and hatred-motivated violence against any living soul within our community. So to everyone on this call today, stay strong, stay healthy, stay blessed, and let's move forward together. We will win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for those words. I think it really reinforces what this initiative is all about, that this isn't just an Asian American problem, this is an all of us problem. This is about all of us building community and making sure that we beat hate through sustainable resources, sustainable ideas that are community based. So thank you so much. I'm incredibly proud to have you as my Congresswoman. Before
Thank you,
we
Robbie. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much for setting aside the time to be with us. Before we go into our presentation around the Hope Against Hate initiative, I'd like to introduce someone from the Public Advocate's Office, an office that has been visible and upfront in all of the work around anti-Asian violence and around all of this anti-hate work since his time in office. On Jumaane Williams' behalf, I'd love to introduce First Deputy Public Advocate Nick Smith.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank all of you, our elected officials, Jumaane's colleagues. Thank all of you. This has been a very, I think, tough year for all of us in terms of COVID-19 and the ripple effects that it's had on all of us. It's stunning and sad and frankly damaging to turn on the TV or get a phone call to learn that a family member, and what I mean is a brother or sister from the Asian American community, has been targeted and attacked. Some 4,000 attacks across this country in the last year, 25% of them in New York City, is an actual crisis. So yes, it is true that there's no more need for talk here. And I'm so proud on behalf of our public advocate to stand with all of you to demand, not just ask, to demand an immediate allocation of $30 million for the Hope Against Hate campaign. It should happen. Let's be clear. The state budget is actually due today. It's going to be late. But to Mayor de Blasio, to Governor Cuomo, and to President Biden, here our collective call. We need this money immediately, immediately. We stand with all of our family members, fellow New Yorkers who have been targeted. And let's be clear, we know, people of color know what it's like to be targeted and victimized. Let's even talk about what we've seen in terms of government. People of color, since the founding of this nation, have been targeted through the law, Asian Americans themselves had an actual law on the books to exclude them from society. As a Black American, I cannot stand by and allow any fellow brother or sister New Yorker to be excluded from our society by anybody. It is unacceptable. So this allocation of funds for this Hope Against Hate campaign is, of course, long overdue, but we should not be begging the mayor, the governor, and the president for these funds. Let's just get it done. We thank the president for the executive order, but let's get this done. So with that, on behalf of our public advocate, I thank all of you. And one last appeal to our fellow New Yorkers that I just gotta say. In terms of public transit, and Noel, God bless you for your bravery and courage. We hear a very simple phrase. If you see something, say something. If you see something, say something. That is not hard. If you see a fellow New Yorker under attack, say something. You'd be saving a life. You'd be saving so much devastation and trauma on top of trauma. We don't want trauma on trauma. We want hope against hate. Let's stand together and let's love and respect and remind our fellow Asian American, Pacific Islander New Yorkers that we are one New York family. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nick, for providing those words. I think it's incredibly powerful how you framed it. This is a community issue, but it's rooted in some of these traumatic narratives that we're seeing on our TV screens today. And the funding will be going to work that's being done, work that has been proven to work that puts communities first. And so much of it is just, if you see something, say something. It's just that simple. So thank you so much for your presence and your words. With that, I'd like to introduce our Deputy Director, Ju Han, to discuss more in detail the Hope Against Hate initiative. Ju?
Thank you so much, Robbie. Thank you to everybody who is here. Thank you to our speakers for Noel for sharing his story, for the show of solidarity, but also just Nick, I really appreciate your strong urging of the personal responsibility that we as New Yorkers have to the Asian community, but also the fact that the time to act is now. And this is what our Hope Against Hate campaign is all about. So I won't go so much into the numbers, but for us, this program, this campaign that we've come up with is really the emergency solution to provide immediate safety for Asian New Yorkers. We have seen too many assaults. We have had those named already, but just to reiterate, in the past year, we've had close to 4,000 national reports of anti-Asian bias from March of last year to February of this year in all 50 states. But as Nick said, New York is the city that has the greatest number of reported incidents, close to 1,100 or over. We just actually heard from a member organization in an Asian majority neighborhood that they had tracked on their own about 350 incidents in the past year. And we know that actual number of 1,100 is really just a fraction of what's going on, because we're estimating that about 10 to 30% of incidents are the only ones that are being reported in some shape or form, whether it's through our reporting tool, Stop AAPI Hate, NYPD, or the Commission on Human Rights, but most of them are not. Even the ones that are being captured in media, when you reach out to them, many people are embarrassed, or there's barriers to wanting to really pursue formal reporting. So I want to point that out. But I think these numbers are just, it's a window into stories like Noel. I think every week, we've had these egregious violent assaults in the past month that have really gotten a lot of media attention. And every time we're horrified, but we can't keep waiting for one more attack, one more loss of life for us to act now. So with that, I want to introduce and talk a little bit more about our Hope Against Hate campaign. What it is it's a landmark solution to ensure immediate safety for Asian New Yorkers, right? We need all the help we can get. We can't sit by and talk anymore about we need to do something. We are beyond statements at this point. On a daily basis, as Joanne pointed out, that one incident every 8 hours is what's happening across the country. And in New York, in a city that has the most number of incidents, we're beginning to see attacks on a near daily basis. And just we can't wait for one more person, one more elder to be sent to the hospital. So what we're asking, what we need for this campaign to be made into a reality is a $30 million investment from our federal leaders, our state leaders, our city leaders in this time where budget negotiations are happening. And we're also calling on private funders, philanthropy, and corporations to do their part to be able to support this effort. As Joanne mentioned, as Ravi has mentioned, we've been doing this work as the Asian American Federation alongside many of our partner and member organizations who have had no choice but to respond to the escalating number of bias incidents and, even if they're not categorized as hate crimes, these attacks on our community, right? That need has been there on top of the layer of COVID-19 that everyone in this country, this world is suffering from. But the violence has been real, it's been visceral, and we really can't, again, we only be waiting to respond when we're seeing these horrific assaults on our community members. We have to respond now. And we talked about these numbers. We need it now, this really kind of unprecedented historic investment. One is that we as a community have never been funded. We as a Asian nonprofit community have always been historically underfunded. So we haven't necessarily had the infrastructure set up to be able to deploy safety resources for our community in times of crisis. At the same time, in recent history for the Asian community, this level of sort of visceral assault on our bodies is the highest level that we've seen. And we're talking about close to 4,000 incidents in the past year. Let's not make that 8,000 incidents a year from now. We have to nip this in the bud and provide immediate street safety solutions that are based in community. So I want to talk through some of the details of what this campaign is going to look like. Some of this is already in the works and happening, but much of it is unfunded, and we actually need dollars behind this effort to sustain it and make sure that it's readily available to all Asian New Yorkers. So one is that we want to centralize the reporting of bias incidents through an in-language reporting tool. The Asian American Federation has an in-language web portal. We also have talked with Congresswoman Grace Meng, and how do we make reporting more accessible, right? There are multiple barriers to why people can't report, but we also need to know the level and depth of the problem and extent of the problem to know how do we, one, address that level of crisis, but also how do we connect people who've been victimized to the services that they need. So we have a web portal, but we also know that our DV groups, for example, that they have hotlines and they have text platforms where people can actually report. And we're thinking about potentially creating an app that's in language where people can report something quickly, because we've had feedback from victims saying, I'm on my way to work. Even though, yes, I've been assaulted, I can't afford to stop and make a report. So if it was a little bit more accessible, potentially we would be seeing more of those reports. And part of that too is disseminating information and education about why this is important, right? There are, of course, language barriers. We know there's systemic barriers, language barriers. There's discomfort in interacting with the government. There's some folks in our community who aren't documented that make it unsafe for them to go to NYPD. But we still want to make sure that if they have been the victims of assault, they are connected to services that they need, whether that's mental health services, whether it's that they need help, a case manager to help them actually report so they can get either pursue criminal or civil measures, or if it's financial assistance. So we will be using our relationships with ethnic media to disperse information about the importance and also these different ways that people can report, and also texting platforms that are popular in Asian communities like WeChat, Kakao Talk, and WhatsApp, because that's where a lot of information is getting disseminated. And we want to make sure that the right information is reaching our community members. We want to establish a safety ambassador program in Asian majority neighborhoods. We know that from Stop AAPI Hate's report, as well as information that we've collected, that most of the incidents are happening in Manhattan, then Brooklyn, and then Queens. So granted, we know that the incidents aren't only in Asian majority neighborhoods, but we are hearing from our member organizations that their community members are not feeling safe even going out in their own neighborhoods, in commercial districts. So we want to be able to train volunteers to understand how to de-escalate situations, because again, the majority of incidents that people are experiencing are verbal assaults, right? So oftentimes when we have verbal assaults, not that they're any less harmful, right? There's a lot of mental health impact for people who are experiencing that, but we know verbal assaults could quickly escalate into physical assaults, and we want to prevent that from happening. So we would train these volunteers to de-escalate situations in a safe manner. Also in self-defense techniques, so that if in case they are targeted, if they are intervening, they know how to protect themselves. And we also know that we need to be able to train people in mental health first aid so that they can detect when a situation where a perpetrator is actually suffering from a mental break. And it's not somebody who necessarily is always violent, but they can't approach them in the way that someone who doesn't have a mental illness would be approached. And these safety ambassadors too, their role would not only be in being a safe deterring presence in these neighborhoods, it would also be to be available to escort our elders, women who feel unsafe in public spaces, which is where the majority of incidents are happening in New York City. About 70% of reported incidents are either happening in the streets, on public transit, to Noel's point, and also public parks. So we want to make sure that's available. And it's really important for us to partner with our member and partner organizations who are the frontline workers, to be able to connect their clients and their community members to these services. We also want to be able to make sure that we are plugging in with volunteer networks that are happening in other neighborhoods, which is really important because we want to make sure everyone knows about resources in all throughout the city. And we'd also partner with our organizations to train them in these same sort of de-escalation strategies, self-defense techniques, and mental health first aid. And we think these partnerships with our community and member and partner organizations is going to help us also partner, build out. We already have, and we've had a number of really great and strong relationships with other community-based organizations serving Black and Latinx communities. And in this moment, they've said, what more can we do? So we think this is an opportunity for us to also build out relationships to address and educate around the rise in anti-Asian violence, and be able to build connections between communities so that we're not exacerbating this situation. So we'd also do, this is again, these safety solutions are solutions that are vetted. We've had these done by other communities of color when they have not had safety in moments of political and social instability. So we'd also work to establish safe zones in communities throughout New York City to serve as safe havens for people who are being targeted. So that if they in the streets feel that someone's following them or is harassing them, that they could go to these clearly marked safe zones where, you know, they would do a poster in the window and they could go there for help, whether it's that the owners and the workers are trained to be able to then connect that person being targeted to services, or that they're just a place where they know, hey, hate won't be tolerated here. And if someone does follow you, this is a place where we can support you and make sure that you get connected to services that you need. And that's really important because we can't put safety ambassadors all over the city, but we also know that there are small businesses all over the city that could serve as safe zones and could be a place where people can go. Also faith centers, we've had a lot of faith leaders outreach to us and say, how can we help? We want to make sure that our spaces are also where people can seek safety. So we would also be working with faith leaders, which is where a lot of people get access to resources and information to be able to, again, increase the network of where people can go to access safety and resources. We would also set up in-language victim support services. So I know the city has a victim compensation fund. It's a little bit different. We've talked about too how difficult it has been for Asian Americans to report, and oftentimes getting access to victim services means that you have to report, and then there's having to engage in the system of what's allowed, eligible expenses, what's not allowed, and that's really challenging in a city where, you know, a quarter of us are living in poverty, half of us don't speak English proficiently. That navigating of a system when you're going through the trauma of having experienced an anti-Asian attack is a lot for a lot of victims. So we would set up, and we're in the process of exploring what this is going to look like, an assistance fund for assault-related expenses. That may look like short-term or long-term, whether it's medical expenses, mental health support, if it's loss of income because a person was attacked and is not able to work. We would create a simple application that's in language, of course, in partnership with our member organizations, to be able to connect people who've been victimized to financial assistance, you know, using clear eligibility requirements. And they would be really important, our member organizations, to be able to connect our community members to these funds. We also, as an organization that has been advocating for and working to increase access to culturally competent mental health services for the past 4 years, we have a number of mental health partners, Asian-led, Asian-serving, who provide in-language, culturally appropriate mental health services. So they are waiting and they are ready to receive referrals from people who have been assaulted. It doesn't always have to be through the lens of counseling, let's say, but there are group support services, for example, if people don't feel comfortable using that Western model of therapy. But what's important is that they have providers who are culturally competent and can address talking about what trauma looks like without alienating people in our community, because mental health stigma is something that is very real and is the number one reason why people don't seek mental health support. But it's important because we've heard from a number of victims who reported or haven't reported that they are experiencing long-lasting trauma symptoms, and we want to make sure they're not suffering silence. At the very least, they're getting connected to people who speak their language, who know their cultures, and can support them through this experience. Something that we have done, but we're now expanding, is, you know, when this all first started in January 2020, the Federation was always already doing, beyond the advocacy of telling our city and state leaders, we need to get in front of this because our small business owners are telling us that no one is coming to their stores, right? They're avoiding their businesses because of the anti-Asian racism. We knew that individuals would start to get targeted, and lo and behold, that's what happened. So we set up our reporting tool, but we also felt that, you know, advocacy in terms of providing safety measures needed to happen right away, because we didn't want these attacks like on people like Noel, on like the Filipino woman who was attacked earlier this week, to get to that point. So we partnered with the Center for Anti-Violence Education to provide many upstandard trainings, which is now the hot topic for everybody, because everyone's saying, we're seeing these situations where things are being documented, but no one's intervening. And why is that? How do we equip people to feel equipped and responsible to intervene in a safe manner so that we're not just watching our fellow New Yorkers getting assaulted? So we have been providing upstandard trainings, verbal de-escalation strategies, and physical self-defense trainings that we're going to now offer in multiple Asian languages, the same languages that we've been providing our booklets in, which we created late last year, in Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Tagalog, and Vietnamese, which have been dispersed electronically to tens of thousands of New Yorkers, Asian New Yorkers, but also to in booklets that we've created that we have printed over 5,000. We've had a demand for at least 10,000 more copies, but because people are saying, I want this booklet in my hand, could carry on with me so that I can make sure I know how to protect myself and other people around me. And we've also been hearing, because of the recent attention on the assault on our seniors, how do we tailor some of the content so that the self-defense strategies can be applicable for our seniors, right? So how do they use an everyday object like an umbrella or a cane or a bag or a phone even to be able to defend themselves so that they can make a quick getaway to either ask for more help or just make sure they're getting out of that threatening situation. We're also working with schools and other impacted stakeholders throughout New York City to provide these trainings and tailor them, especially for parents who really don't know how to respond, who themselves are going through so much fear and trauma, and also are so worried about their kids and how they can protect their kids. And so some of these ideas around instilling a culture of upstander, being an upstander, is something that we're also working with schools and educators and parents to be able to instill in our schools throughout New York City. So that is the crux of our Hope Against Hate campaign. We think it is the right solution for immediate street safety for our Asian New Yorkers, especially our most vulnerable members. If I'm sure many of you in this room right now have either been directly impacted or are worried and losing sleep that your parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and loved ones are potentially going to be the next victim. So this investment of $30 million in this campaign to provide immediate street safety is something that's critical and needed right now. And we really appreciate the support of our elected leaders to say that they stand in solidarity with us to push for that investment. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ju, for that presentation. That's the initiative. It's rooted in community, it's rooted in what works, and it's rooted in what our community needs. With that, we'll be taking questions from the press. So if you could please raise your hand. We'll be calling on people in the order they raise their hand. Please keep questions brief so we can get through as many as possible. We have a lot to say, but any questions, or was Ju's presentation really that thorough? All right, it sure looks like it. Well,
I see a raised hand. I think Amy Yee.
Amy Yee.
Hi, thanks. I didn't know if I'm supposed to write my question in the chat, so I'll just ask it. So thank you for all this. Can you talk about some of the longer term solutions you see? It's an incredibly huge and complex topic, but last year in a webinar that you guys organized, there were some people from law enforcement who were talking about some of the longer term solutions, and that doesn't mean like brutality, it means awareness building actually. Can you talk about some of those longer term solutions that also address some of the underlying causes for what's going on?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about that, Amy. The law enforcement solution actually needs to come from law enforcement. I think NYPD needs to respond, but our solution doesn't necessarily encompass law enforcement, because law enforcement, our community doesn't necessarily respond to law enforcement. People aren't telling law enforcement. If you, as Ju said, only hate incidents, it's only 10 to 30% who are actually reporting what is happening to them. So it means that there is, for many, many reasons, they're not telling law enforcement what is happening. I think NYPD needs to look at this plan, our plan. I think everybody needs to look at this plan. And I really appreciate Nick giving us a shout out that this is a bold plan and we need the investments. But what law enforcement needs to do is a response for Commissioner Shea. Our plan, Amy, once again, is really to talk about what can happen on the community level, because for all the reasons in our neighborhoods, we don't want law enforcement. This really is a community solution that will address safety, get people help, but also to be able to prevent things from happening, not just to the Asian American community, to everybody. I think something like this really rallies all the New Yorkers, all the neighborhoods, and it really, we are a city of neighborhoods, and this is really is that opportunity. So to the extent that NYPD wants to, go on, be able to explain, but as I understand it, Amy, I think City Hall is actually doing that, and they're actually talking to different immigrant neighborhoods about know your rights, like what's the difference between a hate crime and hate incident. And I think that program is actually going on. And if we can lend our expertise to be able to explain that to our community, when to, somebody's not going to call the police because they were spat at, right? But there has to be a reporting portal so that way we can keep track. But if they were physically harmed, if you were, God forbid something horrible happens and you do need to call law enforcement needs to be ready to be able to respond in language. And so I think that's the distinction that we want to make. I don't know if that answers your question, but we can talk offline as well.
Hi, this is Christine Chung. Can I just ask my question this way?
Sure.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to follow up on Amy's question and ask if there are any plans for that in-app reporting tool that you just mentioned, Joanne, for there to be some sort of communication channel between that in-app reporting tool / app and, communicating with the authorities that something has happened. Is there plans for that?
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly why we feel like instead of doing something really big and national, I think the reason why we do it local is because all the nonprofit organizations and local elected officials have the capacity to reach out to law enforcement should anything, something terrible happens, right? Like, I think our approach is, yes, I think it's a mixture of, at times you need to call law enforcement. Certainly there is a rule for that. But oftentimes if you look at the 1,100 hate incidents number, that is not a lot, those are not the instances that you call law enforcement. And I think that's something that we want to also, we want to be able to bridge that gap. I don't know if Drew has anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, that's why data is important, right? Is that one, we're seeing that people aren't reporting, but then when they are reporting, what is the help that they're asking for? And not many say they actually want to report. They actually either want to report and put it out there, or they want to be connected to services. So I think that's why our campaign, including making reporting more accessible and less threatening, I would say, because it's not connected to a government agency, is that we're actually giving people an opportunity to connect to services without doing it through formal channels. I think that's been a deterring factor for a lot of people in our community. Even the most visible recent incidents that have gotten a lot of media attention, when we have reached out to the victims, they don't want to pursue that channel. Even though they've gotten a lot of attention, there's potentially an opportunity to get some sort of compensation, they don't want to. But for us, at the end of the day, the purpose behind this campaign is safety for our community members. Whatever safety looks like for each victim is going to look very different, but we have these different services and solutions to be able to support them in whatever way they need. And that's why we think this is so important.
Are there any other questions? Feel free to.
Hi. I have a question. My name is Catherine Fung. Sorry, I missed part of the presser, but I just wanted to know, is the Safety Ambassador Program something that is starting or has a slated start date, or is it that you need the funding, the 30 million that you're requesting in order to put some of these initiatives and to make them a reality?
It's a bit of both, right? Like in anything with COVID related, you're kind of flying the plane as you're building it. Right now, we are connecting with volunteer networks where there's some semblance of something set up. But I think what the challenge that we've come across is that these are accessible, these sort of neighborhood-based efforts are not accessible for people who don't speak English. So it's great if you're like an Asian American New Yorker and you can access an app and you can go on Instagram and be like, hey, I need someone to escort me. But if you're an immigrant who doesn't speak English, really our member and partner organizations who are some of whom who are here know how integral it is for them to be the conduit to connect people to services. So some of it is happening, but if we really want to do it in a sustained manner, beyond a small area, and we're trying to figure out how to do like a citywide comprehensive solution, definitely that $30 million investment is key.
Thank you so much. I think, we're pressing up against noon. We're at noon. So I think with that, we'll be sending out contact information. If you have further questions, you can reach us. We also put our website at the bottom so you can see our safety resources that are available there. We'll also be putting up more details on the Hope Against Hate initiative as well, unless they're already up. I believe they're already up. And with that, we'll go to closing remarks from our Executive Director, Joanne Yu.
Everyone, thank you again. I know this was really short notice. And I think my staff were up. I don't think they slept last night and we were able to put this together. I want to thank Noel. When I talk to media, everybody would like to talk to, somebody who has dealt with this. And, for many, many reasons, our community isn't coming forward. And this is why this Hope Against Hate is so critical. Noel is the only brave person who has stepped forward, and he's really been setting an example of the importance of coming forward. Noel is going to have a lot of medical expenses. He's going to need a lot of help. We are here. I am here for the long haul with Noel because I need to make sure he's going to be okay. I'm going to need to make sure that all the other victims are okay, and that is our commitment to our community. But our plan isn't just for the Asian American community. It doesn't only involve an Asian American community. It involves every New Yorker. It involves other communities of color, involves every New Yorker, New York City neighborhood, elected leaders. This is all hands on deck because we know what ugly hate crimes look like. This is our call to action and our moment to stand boldly. This is us against racism, everyone. And as dreamy as that sounds, I think that is the reality. People keep asking me, how do we fight out of what is the cause of all of this? And this is racism, right? And it's the othering of the Asian American community. So, I am talking to various leaders about putting together curriculum about Asian American history. Congresswoman Meng has something that she's introducing. And so there's a lot of plans and there's a lot of moving pieces. But again, the money is really to get support on the ground for our community members. Some of the things that we're actually advocating for has worked, and there's a history of success. Our members have done this and it has worked. So we know that we're going to need to work with them. We need to support them as they teach all of us how to do this work. So it's a long road ahead. Sadly, I don't think this is going to be over by any stretch of our imagination, but really ask you for the media to continue to keep an eye on what is happening to our community and to not turn your gaze away when some next tragedy happens, and that you continue to stay with us to monitor progress and to be able to make sure that Asian New Yorkers are okay. So thank you all so much. If you have any questions, I think Mira is available to help direct traffic. But thank you all for coming. Noel, I'll talk to you soon. Nick, thank you so much. My brother, I saw KCS, thank you. I also saw Frankie, my brother. I just really appreciate all of your help with this. And then Senator Schumer, Congresswoman Clarke, just the solidarity and solidarity means so much to us, not just to the Asian American Federation, but to all New Yorkers. So we're very, very grateful. And so everybody, please keep safe. And I ask everybody, the one thing I do want to add is people ask me, so what should we all be, Asian Americans, what should you all be individually be doing, right? I ask all Asian Americans to watch out for your own safety, right? And so for me, I tell people that when I'm walking down the street, I don't like people walking behind me. And so I walk out into the street. I'd rather risk getting hit by a car than something horrible happening because somebody's somebody is walking up behind me and it's, I feel uncomfortable. There are things that we need to do to keep ourselves safe. This morning on Good Day New York, Roseanne said, her Asian friends wear sunglasses and wear caps outside. Whatever we need to do to keep safe, I think that's the name of the game at this point. But with our individual precautions, I think we also need to take precautions for those who can't do it for themselves. So this is that plan. Yes, $30 million seems like a big number, but the reality is it's not that big of a number. This is a drop in the bucket for if everybody pitches in, and everybody's going to need to pitch in because of who we are and our who we are in the community, the important role of the Asian American community. So I want to thank all of you for joining, and be safe, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.